Hello everyone and welcome back to Scandinavian Design 101. I'm Sanna.
I'm Andreas and we are two Swedes and we love design.
Yeah.
And in this video we're gonna talk about the Swedish master of lighting, Hans Bergström, and the company Ateljé Lyktan he founded together with his wife Verna back in the 30s. And of course we're also going to show you a whole bunch of amazing lamps. Let's get to it.
Yeah. Hans Bergström was born in 1910 in the town of Karlshamn in the southern part of Sweden. He had no siblings and the parents were deeply religious, and this obviously led to a kind of strict upbringing. Already at a young age, he shown an interest in technology and mechanics, and he soon started dreaming of becoming an engineer, but this never happened. Bergström's aunt was an artist living in Stockholm. Influenced by her, he started thinking of an artistic career. Instead of technical studies, he started working as an apprentice in 1927 at Ystad Metall, a company known for their decorative objects made from metal. He stayed at the company for 2 years and learned basic metal craftsmanship, skills that would come in use later in his career. In 1929, he was accepted as a student at the School of Arts and Crafts in Stockholm, where sculpture was his major field of study. The life in the Swedish capital was fundamentally different from his protected upbringing in Karlshamn. The outgoing young Bergström thrived among fellow students, playing music and partying when not in the classroom creating art. The teachers immediately realized his talents in design, and after only a year at school, a sundial of his was selected to be exhibited at the legendary Stockholm exhibition in 1930.
Yeah, cool.
That is cool. It was during this time Bergström started combining sculpture with his technical interest, and he started thinking of how to create beautiful yet functional lamps.
And at this time, electric lighting was a quite new invention, and many Swedish homes were still using gas and paraffin lamps. And Bergström studied electric lamps available at the time in Sweden, and he didn't like what he saw. They were too ornamental and often simply electrified versions of the paraffin lamps. Electric lamps had to, according to Bergström, be fully adapted to the light bulb. In other words, totally new types of lamps were needed. Armed with a lot of new ideas, he created a chandelier as his examination project.
While studying in Stockholm, he spent his summer in Karlshamn, and it was during one of these summers that he met his future wife, Verna. She was 2 years younger than him and a skilled seamstress. After graduating, the young couple got married and moved to a large apartment in Ystad, the southernmost town in Sweden. Already at this point, the two decided to start a company together, combining craftsmanship and lighting. The name Ateljé Lyktan was chosen and big plans were made for the future. The name literally means Atelier the Lantern.
Yeah.
They started renting a small factory in the town of Helsingborg and started their company in 1934. The sculptor Palle Pernevi, merely 17 years old, was hired and production started. Soon orders came from not least churches and companies needing lamps for offices and other public spaces. Lamps by Ateljé Lyktan could suddenly be seen in restaurants and cafes and soon also in private homes. Now let's take a look at some of the lamps made during these early years.
Initially, the company was a huge success, and when Verna inherited an old property in the town of Åhus, they decided to move the company to this large 17th century house. They bought a car, an eye-catching standard swallow, and invited Palle Pernevi to come with them. Sadly, the house turned out to be in a lousy condition. After extensive renovations, the house was turned into a combined home and workshop, and production was resumed. As it turned out, Åhus was a quite slumbering and poor town, dominated by tobacco plants. I never heard about tobacco plants in Sweden, but apparently.
Weird.
Restarting the company was a struggle. The restorations were costly, and finding customers interested in modernist-looking lamps turned out to be difficult in the conservative countryside surrounding Åhus. Slowly the company grew, and despite the initial obstacles, they were able to hire 2 metal workers as well as a few seamstresses to produce lampshades. Instead of building lamps, Bergström could now concentrate on designing new models.
The artistic and somewhat decadent couple was considered to be strange outcast by most people in Åhus, and after only a few years in their new house, problems started to emerge. The government announced that the road was to be broadened, and as a result of this, the newly renovated house had to be demolished. Without support from the community, this decision turned out to be impossible to change, and suddenly they lost their home as well as the workshop. It was obviously a hard blow personally as well for the company. Eager not to let this misfortune beat them, Hans soon designed and built a new house. It was a modernist villa with an external workshop well suited for the company. To make a living while waiting for the new factory to be built, Hans worked extra for several lighting companies, among other Bergboms and ASEA. When the hard time was over and Ateljé Lyktan was back on its feet, Hans and Verna opened the store Lyktan in Kristianstad. A lot of towns.
Yeah, a lot of towns in the south of Sweden.
Nobody knows where they are, but they are in the south, all of them.
Yeah.
Selling all wonderful lamps produced in the factory. And now let's take a look at some of the lamps produced during this time.
Yeah. Ateljé Lyktan exhibited lamps in a department store in New York in 1949, and it was obviously a huge step in finding international customers. In the 50s, plastic started replacing traditional materials like metal and fabric, and Hans adapted to this. Several spectacular acrylic lamps were designed during this time, and also spray-on plastic was sometimes used instead of fabric for lampshades.
That is pretty.
Yeah, and let's take a look at some of these lamps. It's no doubt that Hans Bergström was a skilled designer, but financially the company never really flourished. Small-scale production and hundreds of different models made production expensive and time-consuming. In 1956, the financial situation had become unbearable, and to avoid bankruptcy, the company was listed on the stock market. And this was nothing but artificial respiration. Hans and Verna was forced to sell Ateljé Lyktan to Philips in the early 60s, losing their life's work as well as their home. Ruined, the couple moved to the town of Malmö, and Hans started working as a consultant.
Also in the south of Sweden.
Yeah. It's the largest town in the south of Sweden. Later in life, the couple moved back to Aarhus. Verna died in 1994 and Hans 2 years later. Ateljé Lyktan is today a flourishing company, much thanks to the engineer Anders Persson, to whom Philips sold the company for just 10 cents in the 60s. But that's another story. Story. And this is the end of this video about Hans and Verna Bergström and the early years of Ateljé Lyktan, and hope you learned something and enjoyed all the wonderful lamps. Yeah, and if you did, you should also check out our previous videos. We have a lot of videos there.
Yes, thank you so much
for
watching.